Okay, so we'll go ahead and get started. It's kind of hard to introduce Cory. I know Cory probably doesn't think that, but like, I really don't know another farmer that I think is as smart and just all the stuff that you've done on your farm, whether it's Johnson Sioux composting, the collars on the cows. Like, I didn't even realize you had the beef business, and I'm sure you've told me that before in our conversations, but he's doing a lot of amazing things on his farm. He's not afraid to try new things, and I'm really excited about your presentation. So,
thanks, Jay.
Cory Miller, Montana.
Thank you. It's funny the story how I met Jay. So I called him off a video that I saw. He's gonna make me look funny. I'll make him look funny. So I called him and asked him a question about what he was doing with this corn. We don't grow corn. We've never grown corn.
We talked for 40 minutes.
40 minutes.
In April.
And 6 months later, he saw a video come out that we had put together, and he called me up like we'd never met. We didn't have this 40-minute conversation.
I remembered though after the 40 minutes.
So anyway, long story made it fun. So I talked yesterday, and I gave a presentation that I wasn't real happy about, and so I reworked it. And so today's going to be a little bit different. So if you hear yesterday, there's some stuff you missed, you want me to go into deeper detail, let me know. But I wanted to relate this, and I'm going to have the same. Oh, it's up, perfect. So context, right? We're 15 inches of moisture in Missoula. This is my place over here, and of course pointer doesn't work on the TV, highlighted in red. So we're surrounded by 100,000 people. We have people that want to develop our range regularly. And a big issue with ag in this valley, right? There's not a lot of farmland. These are mountains all around us. There's myself and 2 guys to the west. And we're responsible for providing forage for about 3,000 head of horses. All right, and so that's our market. The problem is that taking the resources from my ranch has hurt our soils over the years. And so my focus when I took over is, okay, how can we do this sustainably and continue to build? And so my focus has always been on carbon. And so that's what we're going to talk about today, is all of these little things that we have done along the way to increase carbon and for the benefit of microbes, okay? We run roughly 3,200 acres. A lot of it's leased, but it's everything around us. So we're surrounded by subdivisions up here. If our cows get out, we get told, and then we go all the way to this Dayshaw Lane, which is a main north-south road that they just paved, and actually lost 2 cows on that road this summer. People drive fast because there's no police. One of the benefits of Montana. Production-wise, so we're beef, hogs, chickens, sheep, and pheasants. Pheasants were an enterprise that we brought in 2 years ago, and for the purpose specifically of generating money from, the idea was, let's limit what we're taking as hay, and let's leave cover for pheasants and people to hunt on. And the business really took off. We did, I think, 2,000 birds our first year, 4,000 last year, and this year we're already up over 10,000. So for us, that's a really big deal. We get a lot of people out. Not only do we sell them pheasants, but they're taking jerky and buying beef, and now we're actually doing sheep as well. So, that's transformed our business and really given us some direction that economy changes. People have less disposable income. They're not going to be buying as many pheasants. It's okay. We can quickly pivot away from that enterprise, okay? This is just some examples. My daughter and her grand champion hog. Good looking hog, huh? Beef, this is one of, on grass, hard to do to get that much marbling, but these are the products that we make and sell. Other business is sod, so we have 56 acres of that we do regeneratively, and won't go into the deep details, but I want to talk about a problem we had. So you guys have white grub issues in lawns, so we had in our sod field that we don't want to use chemicals on. We had a white grub infestation this year, and you can't tell in the aerial that I showed you, but right next to us is a big golf course, right? And they're chemically treating everything and often. And all of that water runs down into our ditch, and that's what we irrigate out of. So these white grubs found their way into our sod, and the big question was, how are we going to get rid of them? And if you've had them, you know, I mean, they show up in a week and all of a sudden green grass turns to yellow grass and you don't know why because you fertilize, everything should be perfect. Well, we cut sod and this is what you see on the backside of a roll, this white grub on the right. And the thought with chemicals to treat that was 56 acres would have cost me $2,500. But at this point in time, we had 10-week-old pheasants and we had chicken tractors. And so the solution that we chose to do, and if you've had grubs in your field, you know that voles follow them. So you don't know where they are, but the voles show up and all of a sudden it's really obvious where your grub problem is. So just a little observation. So we took these chicken tractors, filled them with 150 pheasants and just put them everywhere that these were and moved them around for about 3 weeks. Totally took care of the grub population. So one way we were able to save chemicals, just like everyone else, when you start something, you have to learn a lot. And so for me, when initially we had the guy that I had bought the farm from said, here's who you need to talk to. They have all the soil testing going back 50 years. Here's your data. They're going to give you a prescription for fertilizer. And so I did that. So that bill or that estimate was $84,000. And for me, it wasn't something that I could stomach doing. And this is in 2021. And so we pivoted away from that and started putting our resources into composting and carbon. And we'll talk a lot about what that means. So on my place in 21, we put 3,500 tons. This is over the 700 acres that I own. I didn't focus, we put heavier in our irrigated than we did on our non-irrigated, and that was a big mistake. That's where we would see the biggest benefit, is where we could hold more water that we couldn't irrigate. And so as we moved on, of course, these applications got bigger and bigger, and it created other problems, and I'll talk about that too. So for us, this is what our value of compost is. And I did quick calculations with the amount of mineral that we're getting. So, you know, I won't read through them, but look at them quickly. The value of acquiring this compost or building it with this mineral content is about $40 a ton, okay? When we were getting city compost, and that's a big deal because of PFAS and other stuff, which we pivoted away from, but when we originally brought this in, we were buying it for $1 a ton, okay, so super cheap. It cost us more to truck it 2.5 miles from there to our place, and then the labor it took us to put it on than we were buying the product for. But our net gain economically was $28, right? We were ahead of the game and at a pretty good advantage. This is the truck that we used. I hired a guy to do it the first year. Same stuff we just talked about. But my theory is that this carbon was now going to be the housing for the biology that we wanted to grow, right? So we put down this poor quality anaerobic compost, which for my purposes was just the mineral and the carbon. I wasn't looking for the biology because I knew there wasn't a lot in there. I looked at it on microscope. We then grew Johnson Sioux inside of a building, and then we go through and spray and feed this. So one of the issues if you're a biological farmer is you never have enough food available to meet your goals, right? We're extracting business, we're always taking that carbon away. The biology has to eat as well, you know, so there's this constant fight. We think that plants, we can't have biological function in the soil without plants and biology, but likewise they're both competing for similar food sources, okay, especially early on. So what we did is applied that, and this is a pivot right in the middle of my place. And I'll highlight, you can see there's some definite areas of difference in this, and this is where the compost truck hit this road. So as he was driving this way and hit the bump with the tires that shot out a bunch of extra. And then of course going the other direction up above. So when we put on, the original in 2021 was 2.5 tons. I didn't see this picture till later in the year. Well, we went back and we doubled it because that was the assumption. We had composting, there was double it, more mineral. And kept seeing the same result even when we'd move these tracks and we hit that road, we always had better production. And this is super compacted clay. You can see there's a lot of visible soil there, and these plants are 2.5 feet tall in this area in weak year. So it taught us some issues that we had in our soil and had to discover. Did anybody pull the total digestible solids test on their place? Everybody's saying yeah, right? The short story is that we have way more mineral in our soil typically than we need. We've got hundreds and hundreds of years worth. So this is this was our test that I first did. 5,100 pounds of nitrogen. Why in our right mind would we ever apply nitrogen? Okay. I'll go into more into testing here in a little bit. Another thing I found that we were very bacterial dominated. So our soils in 21 were 0.19 to 1. That shows we have very little fungal. Of course, pH is a bit high. And another thing to highlight is we have no protozoa, right? And if you're new to this, sometimes the testing doesn't really, well, I'd say it confuses you, right? So when I got this first test, I said, oh, it says I'm terrible. We have high bacteria, no fungi, no protozoa. But then I would go and I would look on my microscope at a soil sample and I'd find protozoa. And I would find protozoa that was in a very heavy reproductive state, right? And a lot of bacteria. So why was the system not working? Well, what I realized is that the testing really couldn't test for protozoa. Okay? Things have changed. You know, this has been something that's really quickly developing in PLFA testing. And then now, of course, there's NLFA testing, which can give you better data. So for me, I got really carried away early on that I had no protozoa. And so the focus was we need protozoa. We can't cycle without it. Of course, then nematodes show up. And when you get out and actually look, you find an earthworms. And this picture on the right was a really small earthworm that showed up, like baby earthworm that showed up in one of my compost extract samples. Almost scared me to death. So what is this? It's not a protozoa. We got something bad. No, it's just a baby earthworm. Succession has been the thing that we're fighting now. All right. So as you put more carbon in the system, you tend to create a more fungal dominated system. Okay, so you heard about succession today. This is neutral. We have bacterial dominated, we have fungal dominated. All right, different species show up in each. So we're, you know, hey, grassland, so we should sit somewhere over here. Well, as I continue to mess with our pH and move it more acidic, and then of course put on this high fungal compost, we quickly moved, and I'll show you some data where the testing shows us, but we moved from 0.19 to 1 to 0.6 to in 2023, we were at a 2 to 1 fungal to bacteria. And we hit all of a sudden this big wall, right? Like last year, 2,000 tons of production. This is in 23. And then we show up this spring, and I didn't realize how big of an impact that would have on our ability to produce grass, right? When you get high fungal, you're not having cycling anymore. There's not enough carbon for everybody to go around, okay? And so the solution was, how do you increase bacterial growth? Anybody have something they use, a little trick?
Would adding sugar and feeding those be what?
Yeah, perfect, yeah. Has anybody tried that? No, so it's super cool.
We're too bacteria dominant.
Yeah, so this might work really good. We're the other way around now. And so all of a sudden, first cutting of hay on this 50-acre field that we did a lot of data on, poor production. And what's going on? Why am I not cycling anything? And so talked to a buddy of mine, and he said, you know, just do a pound of sugar an acre every Monday morning. And I'm like, that's gonna do absolutely nothing. Well, so I did a pound of sugar on one area, and then I did 100 pounds on another area. And what happened where I applied that 100 pounds, we had, you know, on a microscope, like crazy production of bacteria. But it was too much. It got too hot. It actually killed the roots.
Oh, wow.
Right? So that was a negative. But where we put 1 pound, right, we saw a steady increase. And what happened then in the second week, I was seeing more protozoa show up. And in the third week, we had like full thriving ecosystem. And then all of a sudden production caught up. Right? So you can manipulate quick. And it's much easier to go from fungal back to bacteria than it is to go from bacteria to fungal. That takes time. So one of the keys to carbon, the more carbon you have, the more flexibility you have. It's a great buffer.
What form of sugar?
This is just white sugar. I went to Costco and bought bags of sugar. It was the only option I had that was close and quick. So I think it was 20-pound bags, and this is a 50-acre field, so 2 bags a week. I think it was like 16, 18 bucks a bag. So pretty cheap. The other thing in succession too, what I think is important, right? On the right side, we're growing way more biomass. Okay, so as we move more acidic, we get more to a forested soil. 2,200 grams is 9.5 tons an acre. Where we have an early succession, we're 0.5 ton an acre, right? So as farmers, at least as forage farmers, we want to play that line back and forth. We want to get kind of as far as we can and then dip back to change. All right, this is some winter wheat that I grew this spring, or some spring wheat that I grew this spring. And this is a picture of a non-composted area as just as a sample. In this, it's pretty obvious that we have a lot of bare soil, okay? And it's also obvious that we have quite a few unwanted pest species in a wheat crop. There's weeds all over in that. Right next to it, and this is 6 inches away, right? I just took a heavy strip, put about 1 inch of compost down, and then put these seeds in. Looking through, right, we have a lot less soil visible. And over here on the right, we don't have the weed pressure.
So Cory, is this compost that you made, that you dry spread?
Yep, so this is dry spread. We have the big pile I was walking on. So we let that sit there, and that's kind of one of our mother piles. And this was me just going, filling up the Ranger with a couple shovel loads and just laying in these 2 strips. Actually, I think it was like 4 rows, 5.5 inches wide. Heavy compost, no compost. This is them side by side. So none, yes, none, yes. Right, same soil, same everything. And I believe this was, well, you can see the clouds, it's a fairly rainy day for us, which is rare. Right, the other thing that we had in the composted side is we had lots of ladybugs. There's 2 of them together right there. This other picture, I mean, my hand's not that big, but there's 7 different ladybugs that counting just in this picture. But what do you see? I mean, the predominant thing on the ground there is a lot of carbon. All right. Now, later, I knew we would probably have a problem with this much because we needed more nitrogen, right? We'd taken a pile of nitrogen, and we're leaving all this carbon that's trying to take nitrogen too, so they were competing. I did not treat this, and at the end of the year, when everything was said and done, yields were pretty similar. All right, so we had a much healthier plant, we had more cover, and I think we were putting more carbon in the soil. But as far as yields go, we didn't increase anything by having this here, simply because our nitrogen was being taken up by that wood as it was breaking down. All right, so this year we're gonna do something a little bit different. We're gonna try to screen that out.
You're gonna try what?
We're gonna screen out more of that carbon. So we're gonna focus on just getting the small particles down as a blanket or as a fertilization application. Well, say it fertility in general, but try to take that carbon out so it's not robbing nitrogen. And on our place too, we do a lot of different things, and we see that is our biggest factor, is how quickly all the nitrogen disappears. We do Haney tests and have every year. And what I want to point out in this picture is that what's happened with our organic matter. So when we started testing in 21, this particular field is the full pivot that we have, the one we do most of our tests on. 6% organic matter. You can see our pH has declined over time, and that's a direct function of the carbon that's going on. And our electrical conductivity has continued to increase. Okay, it's improving. I should be able to grow more, better, everything that we do. Okay.
And you think that lowering the pH is a direct result of getting more carbon back in your soil?
More biology. Yeah, for us it is. We're cycling nutrients quicker. All right, for me it has to pay, right? And so I took some information. This is a study that was done in '94 that determines really what is soil organic matter and what is the percentages of the mineral that are hold. And it's a pretty constant fact that through all soil types, when you have the organic matter, you're gonna have per acre, right? So this is 1% per acre. You're gonna have 1,000 pounds of nitrogen, okay? And this is all forms. 100 pounds of phos, 100 pounds of potassium, 100 pounds of sulfur, and then 10,000 pounds of carbon. Now, over the last 8 or 10 years, we've now put a price on what the value of carbon is. So in here, I valued it at $40 a ton. Anybody in here selling carbon credits on their place? No? Yes? Oh, we talked yesterday. Yeah. So fairly, my number may be a little high, maybe a little low, but it's still a lot of money that you have tied up, right?
Paying you $40?
What's that?
Is anybody paying you $40 for carbon credits?
They're not paying. I haven't signed up for carbon credits.
We get like 6.
6 now? So,
Based on,
well, let's just change that number. So if we go down to 6, that's probably what, 1/10 of a penny. So maybe from $200 down to $10. My point is here, okay, that drops us a couple of thousand in our total, but we have a significant amount of value in soil carbon in our land. And that's kind of the point I wanted to make. You know, there will be carbon, you know, as we get to a decarboned world as we move forward. I think that's where politics are going to take us. You know, as farmers, we have the ability to capture some of that. And I think personally, we should be rewarded for these practices. Now, how that comes to us, I don't think that the horse that's going to win the race has been figured out yet. But I think coming down the pipeline, there will be something. Right? We talked about our PLFAs and LFAs in 21 and 22. I wanted to add in this information from 2023. And I think the most important thing on this slide is that we compared, so this CM native 1, 2, and 3, these are samples of our native ground that are next to this full pivot, all right? And what it shows, I think if you're being a good steward, if you're operating, you know, theoretically based on some science, as good, if not better, than Mother Nature. Right, so that's what I'm trying to show in this slide. So our organic matter in our farm fields is above what our native undisturbed land is. All right, now those are a more defined or I would say a more aged ecosystem. So, you know, there's deer, we're not putting cattle in there, we're not doing anything. So what's happening in nature is what's manipulating that. And with us continuing to put carbon and grazing and all these other activities we do, we're increasing at a rate much faster. All right, so that's my scale. If, you know, I'd recommend managing your land at least in that way. It's a good test. To a little bit about the systems that we use. So this is a Bio5 extractor that we've had since 2020, early spring or fall of 21. It's Kevin, my stepdad. He is our microbe saucier is what we call him. So he's the guy mixing everything up. We inject with an agri-inject pump. It's a lot of guys that are injecting fertilizers through irrigation have one of these. They work really well in biology. It's a diaphragm pump. The issues, I'm not going to call it issues, but we have had not the greatest success of efficacy running through here. What we have found to really help us is food sources for biology. So when we're putting fish or other things through, we're seeing a bigger impact in the soil. Running a compost extract through, you know, I don't have the science that shows that we're actually getting a huge benefit or a benefit at all, okay? I just don't have the equipment to test, but this tool was something that me and a buddy put together. It's a Brown manufacturing aerator. You know, we're in pasture land, so we're not tilling soil rarely, and not at all anymore. And so, you know, how do we get biology in if we can't penetrate or it's not very effective going on the surface? Yes?
Would you say the name of that product?
This is just a Brown manufacturing aerator. I think they're made in Mississippi or Alabama. I think Airway is very similar design. It's got a tooth on it that's about 6 inches long, 1/2 inch to 3/4 of an inch in diameter and 4 inches wide. And all it is just poking holes in the ground. And we put a drip bar that we were dripping extract into those holes. And testing, you know, I'd go in with a microscope and look at the first day and then at 10 days and at 30 days. And the biology that I was putting on, I was seeing on a microscope. We since have done a full DNA analysis of our compost and then what was in this field prior, and then matched it up in this same method. And we've gotten, you know, the species that we're trying to introduce are in there. I'm not saying they're gonna survive, but they are in that soil. So that was a big benefit for me. The other thing, of course, cattle were doing the same job. This is our estriol, our estriol, so we have a liquid in-furrow injection system on it. effective way for us to put in carbon. Does anybody have Leonardite that they have access to? Has anybody made humics before or extracted them? So Leonardite's an old carbon source we get out of Canada. It's close to us and cheap. I think we were buying it for like $10 a ton. Filling up totes, driving up there, filling up totes and bringing them back. And we would, by adding acid or an alkaline chemical to this, we could separate out the humic, fulvic acids and then liquefy those. And so what we found is a really good way to feed them was just to use our drill and liquid inject but not put any seed in. So it's given us a way to get some liquid in furrow with the tool that we already had. Yeoman's plow or something else that can put underground, not really move or disturb soil, but get you liquid under the surface. Pretty good success we found. So something.
Your humics, or was that
We've done it with everything. So we put fish, we put every food source we possibly could to try to get it in soil. And this just seems to be the simplest, right? It's the only tool we have that's heavy enough to break through a lot of our hard clay. So, and then seed coating. Has everybody in here tried seed coating? If you put seed in?
Yeah.
Biology or buying coated seed?
Like, well, just Johnson Sioux.
Johnson Sioux. So one trick that we tried, if anybody does any greenhouse work, we do a lot of extract where we're soaking our seeds overnight.
Okay.
Right, and it's tough to put that through a drill, and especially to do it on big scale. But this past year, we put up a hoop house with big fans in it, and so now we actually soak seeds overnight in extract, and then next day dry them out quickly. So they're just starting germination and then have gone and seeded, and really saw some exciting results this year.
So how quickly after you dry it out can you plant? You have to plant it.
We would soak them overnight. We'd turn fans on at 8 in the morning in a greenhouse, so it was hot, right? Early sun came up at 5, and we'd be seeding by 10 that morning.
Okay.
So I can't tell you I've let it go longer. You'll have problems if you wait. You'll be germed out.
Yeah.
And not a good thing, but for us, no problems doing it that quick.
So you're saying soaking, or like how much liquid is applied to that seed, or is it?
Soak, like we put it in a tub and we throw the seed in and we let it soak, right? Everybody told me it was a dumb idea. It could have been a dumb idea, but it worked well. We were able to dry it off. My history is in drying out structures, right? My career, so we have lots of fans. Your house floods were the guys you call, so brought in our big fans and we're able to put up some screens and blow against it, get it dry quick and in the cedar. Kind of a cool experiment. I can't say it's going to work. We're going to try it again this year and see how well it does. But for us,
What type of seed was it?
and this year, this was triticale that we planted in the fall, so small grain. And everything that we've done, biology is the key, especially on the seed. Anybody studied the rhizophagy process that Dr. White's?
But do you want to explain that real quick, Cory? Why does every seed that you put in the ground have to get a biological seed coating?
Well, I'm not going to say it doesn't, but in our perspective, right, when I started, we were very bacterial dominated, right? And so we would get seeds, but we would have a lot of disease, right? Similar probably to what you guys have. And we had really no function of our soil. This allowed me to have some manipulation. So when you wake up that seed and you have biology on it, those individual organisms are sending out signals, okay? And these signals are communicating with the other biology, saying kind of like us, right? You go to high school and you're the jock and we have these cliques that we kind of get into. Soil doesn't work that way, right? Everybody's angry, everybody's hungry, everybody wants to eat. And if you only have a single species, right, that's doing a single job, you can't accomplish what I would call actual work. And so by introducing these species on the seed, we have them in the exact place where when that root does pop out of that seed, it's ready to provide a resource. That plant then is now providing a resource back, so putting out this carbon, okay? Part of the photosynthetic, I think a lot of farmers, we can't grow any crop. We can't grow a human, we can't grow an animal without carbon, right? It's a required part of the process. Photosynthesis takes nitrogen, carbon, and sunlight to make sugar. If, we're talking about global warming and all of these things that happen because of a higher carbon, well, as a farmer, I want that, right? I want 6,000 parts per million carbon in the atmosphere because it's gonna be much easier for me to grow a plant, right? Our problem, we're in the bottom of a valley where the wind blows through the middle of it all the time. So however much carbon we're cycling in the form of CO2 out of that soil to get absorbed by a plant for photosynthesis, 10 o'clock in the morning when the wind starts, my photosynthesis shuts down, okay? The plant can't get enough carbon to make sugar or convert nitrogen into sugar. So how do we fix that? Well, wind blocks, growing a tall crop, growing your corn on the predominantly wind side to slow the wind down, all these things benefit. And so we're specifically putting up sunflowers on our west side just to give us some sort of a wind band. Trees don't hold up, at least where we are, or they don't grow fast enough is a big problem. So if I started now, maybe in 20 years, I'd see a benefit. That answer your question?
Yeah, great.
Okay.
Do you need to put it on the seed, or is in furrow good enough for biology?
So there's been some, you guys all know Russell Hendrick, I'm assuming. So Russell, I talked to him about a project a while ago, and he had put some pretty hot compost in on seed and found that it was detrimental. It was actually eating the seed coat. When we do this, we're a fairly watered down variety, right? The humics, I think, is more important than the actual biology, but you're still going to get millions of bacteria on the seed. It just happens. Yeah, I mean, I think you can go either way, but a lot of people don't have an injection system to inject into the soil. Coating your seeds significantly cheaper. I mean, everybody has a 50-gallon drum that you can throw some seed and some liquid in and spin around, right? So you can go either way. I mean, we do both, but I think we see success both ways too. It's like the shotgun approach. Shoot and see what you hit. One of the coolest things that we do is bale grazing, and I'm just going to go in a little bit. So this is our land, and then of course you see the airport tower on the right side, and then just behind us the runway. These so these are on 30-inch centers. We put last year 379 bales, and we're feeding I think like 130 head of cattle, and we did it in 4 segments. So this area that you see on the bottom right is the first square that they ate, and then we moved back over here and had 2 sets, and then this is the last third. These next pictures that you're going to see were taken from right about in this location between the 2. One that way and one back this way. So this is Josh, he's my cow guy. High school kid that loves regenerative agriculture. And this picture was taken June 28th. So it should be at the height of our growing season. And this is the grasses that are in our non-bale grazed area. So we didn't have enough winter to continue grazing there before it got good enough, and we didn't want cows destroying it when it got wet. So this is where we stopped. Okay, this is the area that we bale grazed that you saw the dark square, all right? And I did some calculations on what we wasted there in carbon. We'll get to that in a second, but people that have tried it, and that we were the same way, we had this big problem of residue that would stay on after bale grazing that we couldn't remove. You couldn't seed through it. It was just a thick, let's just call it a 4 or 5 inch mat that was holding all these nutrients and basically sitting there promoting weeds, right? It gave us bare soil that we would see some weed problems with. And so I started mixing up Johnson Sioux extract, high fungal, but putting fish and sugar with it, taking it up to these and applying them once a week, just giving it a douse, like 60 gallons per area where we had a bale, and do it through the wet season, where in 6 to, well, I'd say in even 4 to 6 weeks, these were completely gone, right? So we'd cleaned up that carbon. That was a big deal because all of a sudden insects showed up, everything showed up because we had a food source for them. And so that's where we were able to, this was bale grazed last winter. This is Josh in June. And those grasses were able to get up and get through. You know, we looked at what the tonnage was. You can see this is terrible. And then over here, massive grass. Cows absolutely loved it. So we got a grazing in the middle of summer on this area that we had never had before. Pulled those cows off, and now it's still grass this tall through the winter that we're pheasant hunting in. So we've been able to take advantage of it a different way. All right, so the value of hay, and this is something that, being a hay producer, you know, once I started doing these calculations, I'm like, I'm an idiot for selling my hay. We need to start buying more. But short story is, the value of the nutrients in the hay that we're producing are, you know, roughly $97. That's what's leaving my place. And now, of course, this is at $40 a ton carbon. So if we lower that back down, it's going to be a little less. But still, if you look at it from your beef side, right, we're feeding cattle this hay. So cows are going to eat 35 pounds a day. Some a little less, but 35 pounds a day. On a ton of that, if I'm getting a pound a day gain and fat cattle prices are going to be at $2, I'm getting $114 economic value out of that bale of hay for my cattle, right? Like, that's 200 and do the math, $210 is the value of something that I'm paying $150 for. Why would I be making hay and shipping it off-site, right? So we changed this year. So rather than doing that, we told all of our customers we're not going to sell them round bales anymore, but if they want to come to our place with their cattle this winter, we'll feed them for them. And so we expanded the bale grazing. So now we're doing, you know, our first test was only 30 acres. This year's about 140 acres of it, and we've got 275 cattle now, ours plus doubled it, that we're feeding them on all winter, just to try to improve this quality of soil in an area where we get zero production. Okay, so for us, it makes it pay to no longer sell our hay, or if so, find a way to feed other people's cattle.
So are you assuming that you're going to have to, I mean, obviously as you get there, you're going to have to supplement with some biological to get the carbon burned down?
Yeah.
Until at some point it's going to fix itself, but.
It is, and you see like even the biomass that came just in the first year after, right? We went in and then grazed that, right? And tried to hold as much moisture, because this is all, I mean, we're dry, not as quite as dry as everybody around here, but we're dry, and that's non-irrigated. So for us to get that kind of production, you know, really, and there's more to it in the bale grazing, right? That's all clay soil, and that is that one day I went up there, and I think it was the day I took that picture, drove up on my truck and sat on the ridge and just looked across, and hundreds of ducks got up, right? So they were in there picking seed out and eating something out of that.
What kind of tonnage are you are you doubling what you're allotting for the cow to eat?
No, so we did this math at 35 pounds a day, right? They waste a lot, but they don't waste nearly as much as we think. They're taking value.
Too much, or they really will waste.
They will. So how we opened it, the biggest thing is having space, right? If you want them to utilize it, they can't be fighting, because then they're just pushing each other back and forth over it. So once we had space, right, you can fit 7 to 10 cows around a bale. So put out that much and leave it for a couple of days, as opposed to just feeding them every day. So we had more success by giving more space and letting people relax. Let's see. The other thing we do, and cover crops have been super valuable for us in between hay production. So we have an alfalfa field. We got to come out of it for a year. We found that we've had pretty good success staying out for 3 years. So this is kind of a process for me. So in 21, this 50-acre field was in winter wheat. So when I bought it, winter wheat was planted. So in June, we harvested that. We went into it with a multi-species cover crop, and then we grazed it that fall. This fall it was ridiculous, the amount of production we had. So this is here. This is what it looked like fall of 21. Put cows, and at that time the herd was a lot smaller. I think I had like 55 to 60 that we were wintering that year. And these are just mom cows, no calves on their side. Put them out in this field and came through with hay. You know, we get snow, and like, okay, they're not going to be eating grazing anymore. Put hay out, and went back the next day. They didn't touch any of it. Okay, so now what? Is there something wrong with my hay? Is it real bad? And it wasn't. It was fantastic. But the next day, they wouldn't touch it either. And what happened, we got snow. It started covering up these radishes and turnips. They started to break down and go to sugar. The cows were fat. There was nothing I could put out that was any better than what this cover crop was in the winter for them to graze. All right, so pulled them off of that. That next spring we planted a oat pea barley mix that we grew up for hay, kept there. The whole plan was to feed it to them, but we were super high nitrate. So we couldn't feed it. I ended up selling it to a guy that was feeding open cows and grinding it with something else, so we got no benefit. But I did, as soon as that was off, put this multi-species cover back in for the second season in the fall. It didn't do as good as the first, but we got the same effect. We still grazed it. Put an alfalfa mix in that next spring, so this is spring of 23. Got decent growth, but this year it was stupid ridiculous, like 9 tons of hay that we pulled off that field. And there was no fertilizer, no nothing that I could add that would give me that same result.
Is that 2 or 3 cuttings?
There's 3 cuttings. And then we got a 4th grazing. We had steers on it that we just took to the sale that were grazing this up until the snow came. Like, you cannot put a value on what these crops do for cycling for you. And for me, you know, everybody says they do it. This was like for my eyes. Like, we had all of a sudden not poor, I mean, this is decent soil. This is 7% organic matter. Good exchange. It's irrigated. Like, we can do some stuff. But this kind of changed my tune. And so now we're moving, you know, a wheat crop is no longer important. Like, if we're coming out of hay, we're going into a multi-species cover, and we're going to leave it for 2 years. Because we know that this will hang around for 2 or 3 years, so we can get through this alfalfa, get our hay, and then this goes back to a grazing field. Okay. These are just some random pictures. This is some corn that we did, some grazing corn, and just drilled it right into an existing alfalfa hay field. And you can see the alfalfa growing up. We had 7.5 tons of forage to fall and winter graze, not this last winter.
How many years did you drill the corn?
This went in on July 5th, I think was the date. I'm pretty sure it was the date. The other thing too is this gave us some really good height and cover for pheasant hunting. So all fall, we hunted pheasants in it, and then the following spring, of course, the deer loved it too. We had lots of big bucks in there, and then we ended up calving on this field, and did really well, like surprisingly good on it. This is some roots from a video that we did. So I ran out of time and I want to save some for questions, so I skipped the video. These are roots of extracted and non-extracted we did in 2021. This is cereal rye that I'd planted in the fall, and crazy how this whole experiment happened, but it was a 40-acre piece that I was planting this in to graze the following spring. And put all this time and effort into getting a really good injection system on our drill, putting food sources, everything that everybody told me, and did my first pass where I put liquid down, and the whole rest of the field, the machine was plugged. And so I got no biology in furrow, and none of the seed was coated. But what happened the following year is that we had cereal rye in the treated side up here. The rest of the field, it was, 1 to 18 inches tall. Super clay soils that had been heavily extracted, we were biologically dominated. All of these negatives led to me figuring out like how important biology was for us in our soil. These are the 3 pictures of the soil that we have. So on the left-hand side, this is a 2% organic matter. This is just off the side of our road. In the middle, 7, and then on the far right is our best soils is greater than 10%. And I use that as an example. This is aggregation, this is dust. They sit in jars on my desk, and the stuff on the right, it's been locked in that jar for 2 years, and it looks exactly like moon dust, right? The other 2 samples are still sitting there. They still have drops of water that are inside these jars. These were all taken on the same day. There was no rain, but it's just the holding capacity of what organic matter does for you. And for me, this is how important it is. And I think for you, you should do these calculations because it is too. For us, alfalfa needs 6 inches per ton of rain or of moisture to produce a ton of dry matter. The average hay production around us is 5 tons, so that's 1 million gallons of water that it takes to produce 5 tons. It's a lot of water. Okay, we average 9 inches of rainfall between April and September, so we're only getting 217,000 gallons of that million that we need. Doesn't look like a very good place to grow alfalfa, does it? Right? So it's using 8,100 gallons a day. If we put that out, what are different soil types? At 2%, I got 5 days of water that I can store. That's it. At 7%, I got 17, and at 10%, I got 24 days. How likely is it that we're going to get a rain in 5 days? It's not happening for us.
Unless you got hay on the ground.
Unless you got hay on the ground. That's true, 100%. But 17 days, I doubt it. But 24 days, like there's a good chance in the summer that we're going to get some sort of a sprinkle. If we can capture it, we'll get some continued growth. But without irrigation, you can't grow alfalfa. That's what happens in the West. Right? So for us to increase, since I started, we're up 2%. So I've built myself 5 days of resiliency into just our soil in the last 3.5 years. And it's possible. You guys can do it. Any questions?
Or you would tell them about your corn year this year.
What about it?
Just what it was, and what it yielded, and how much inputs you put on it.
Yeah, so amendments, none. So we had an alfalfa field that we were changing out planted a little late. It was June 4th for us, which my goal is to get in Mother's Day. But planted, and this was just feed corn. So
And what was the day length?
What's that?
The day length?
This was, I think, 72 day.
Okay.
Right around, I know, 71, 72 day. Put it in, but it's following alfalfa. And so planted this, we had really good production. Ended up at 120, I think 127 bushels with zero fertilizer from us, and me not having a clue what I was doing. I actually watered it too much. I didn't know that you could do that, but I did. But we had production, so we actually grew corn. Our problem is we don't have the heat units to dry it out towards the end, so we went to dent and we can never get it down below 14%. So I picked half of it, put it in a big pile. We've dried it and we're since now feeding it, so we throw it through the grinder and feed cattle. But it gave us even more area for hunting pheasants. And we're gonna calve our cows on that standing corn in the spring. They escape almost every day out of our other areas trying to get over there because they know it's so good. And so we're battling that fight right now. And I think we're gonna end up, alternating this field. So every 4th year, we're probably gonna do some corn around our place. It's done some really phenomenal stuff with our soil. Like corn roots are, it's hard to see in this, corn beans rotation how it just destroys the field so bad because there's nothing better at building soil health than a corn plant. There's just so much production that's happening. Yeah, sorghum's good. Sorghum's shorter. Pheasants, it's easier not to shoot your partner when we're hunting in it.
That's a big economic advantage.
What's that?
Not shooting your partner.
Oh yeah, that's a problem.
Are you still using Johnson Sioux in custom applying on your neighbor's on
our sod? Yeah, so we do. So one of the things when we sell sod, we warranty it, but we require them to pay for a program of us managing their sod. So we do a lot of extracts, even in the subdivision next to us, and we're using, of course, some fertilizers and spraying some chemicals because that's what these people want, but we're able to manage carbon's a great buffer. That's the purpose. We have it in our soil because it can manage these extremes for us. And there's huge value in just constantly making sure that you have adequate supplies of carbon. You see it in every grazing. Fernando talked about it today. You come to our place and, I don't want you to see soil. But in some of our drier areas, there's nothing we can do about it. We have to do these activities. We have to bale graze. We have to put compost because we can't get anything to grow otherwise. Right? That answer your question?
That's great.
Any others?
What do you, so you talked about you soak your seed before
Mhm.
and then you dry it out. So with the liquid, what do you do with
The leftover?
the leftover?
So no, this is a funny story. Okay, so right next to where our compost barn is, we've got the main ranch house, which a buddy of mine lives in, but there's 3 lilac bushes, all right, and an apple tree. And so anything that's excess or left over gets dumped in the middle lilac bush. And so you look at it, and I wish I had a picture, because when I do a class in the morning where we go and look at microscope in our compost. And as we walk out there, I tell them, hey, look over there, it's about 100 yards away, and I say, there's a line of lilac bushes. Can you tell me which, the one on the right, the one in the middle, or the one on the left looks the healthiest? And people don't know what a healthy plant looks like, right? What's the assumption? What color should it be?
Darker green.
Darker green, right? And everybody's like, oh, well, that one over there looks bushier. And I'm like, okay, well, but the one in the middle is doing more photosynthesis. Plants are just like us. If I wore this out in 100 degrees in the summertime, I would be attracting a lot of sunlight, attracting a lot of heat, right? But if I went out in a white t-shirt, I'm telling the sun, hey, I don't want to do photosynthesis. Like, I don't have the minerals I need to do the conversion. So a plant that's dark green is advertising to the sun, give me more sunlight. And so it's obvious. I mean, that middle lilac bush that we're putting extract on, like, significantly shades darker. Bushier, and when you go up close, they can't see it up close, but on the way back, we walk up close, and the buds, the good thing about lilac is it leaves the buds, so you can see them through the summer. There's 10 times more buds on that than the other one. And then the apple tree, everything else that's excess, if it's still too wet, then we'll go to the apple tree. And the first year in 21 when we got there, I mean, maybe a 5-gallon bucket of apples were produced on this tree. Had a big storm, another one fell onto it and broke some of it off. But this last year, we had, it was skid steer buckets full of apples that we were pulling off. Way more. We made cider, we did all kinds of exciting stuff with it, but everything extra, there's nothing wasted. It's either gonna get re-inoculate another compost pile that we're making, or it's going into the field. Yeah.
Would you have a recommendation for like a class for understanding microbial life using microscopes?
So I took Lane's Soil Food Web school. There's some positive and negative to it. I mean, you get a good knowledge, but it's expensive. I'm confident, I'm happy that I did it because I did learn a lot. But there's so much out there that you can learn. I mean, if you guys met Simeon at Hawassi, if you haven't, go talk to him. He's putting together some really fascinating information. And there's enough people out there that understand now, farmers that are using this, that understand it, that I think YouTube University isn't all that dumb anymore. There are people that you can learn stuff from. We use a microscope just for observing species, right? It's not that I know exactly all the species. We're just watching trend, right? And it's crazy how your soil works, right? We feed sugar to it, we have a bacterial explosion, okay? Within 2 days, those populations are 10, 20, 30 times greater than they were 2 days prior. Then 48 hours, you start to see these testate amoeba start to develop eggs, okay? And then you go on, so you get to day 2 and 3 and 4. Now all of a sudden, you're seeing small cysts where they've shedded this egg and you have new testate amoeba showing up, right? So, and this system goes like this. Now all of a sudden we run out of sugar, we run out of bacteria, these other big organisms have eaten more, and you can just watch this ebb and flow, okay? So it's like the microscope does a lot of really exciting things, but really it's just giving you a trend. Where are we going? What's the problem? Do I not have any of these? Is my compost aerobic or anaerobic? It's just for you to observe, right? So
It's an important management tool, right?
I wouldn't tell a new farmer to go out and spend $2,000 on a microscope,
Oh, yeah.
right? There's places that'll do it for cheap, and you just need the information, right? You just need to know is this good or bad. I don't necessarily think you have to know everything about it. Because when I started, I didn't use that. I had a cheap microscope, but I really got good at it, and we were doing classes. I mean, I was teaching people how to run the microscope on my place. So, and you know, I think I made enough money that first summer to buy the Infinity i4, which is what Simeon has there. And they're cool because you can adapt it to video. You can now start teaching. You know, there's so many different places to learn about this stuff that, you know, start with a book, understand how the biology works, and then microscopy is not all that difficult. I mean, I could teach you in 20 minutes. Okay.
Do a web search for Matt Powers.
Yeah, Matt's phenomenal.
You can buy some books, they're not
Yep.
$100, and YouTube, you'll learn a lot of basics.
Yeah, there's a Facebook group, the Soul Food Web School, that I like because people are constantly posting what is this pictures, and you know, I'm not gonna go out and look in a book to try to find something that I don't see on here. But just as you scroll through that and you're like, oh, okay, there's a water bear, that's what I'm looking for. Or, you know, all of these different microorganisms. You know, when you're making good compost, you don't see all these bad guys that everybody talks about to watch out for. There's no spirochetes or, you know, I don't have candy canes spinning around in my liquid. We don't have ciliates, so I don't know what they look like. You know, I do, but I'm just saying, like, they're not there, you're not seeing them every day, so you don't really care about them. You're just trying to see, are we good or bad?
What all are your revenue streams that you have on your farm?
Revenue?
Yeah.
So sell hay,
Yep.
sell beef, sell pork, pheasant hunts, harvest hosts, so camping. Anybody else in here do harvest hosts on their place? Harvest host? It's a really cool thing that we do. So people are allowed to go to a website if they're coming, and we're lucky geographically. We're halfway between Yellowstone and Glacier and on the main highway. So people that are going in between them in the summer need a place to stay in their camper. So they pull in, they stay for free, but they're obligated to buy something. You know, some of the best business deal that I've done on farming was this past summer. We had a football player for the Atlanta Falcons come by and camp with his family. We had no idea who he was, but he bought some jerky, left, got a call a week later, hey, can you ship 100 pounds to the football team? And I said, well, we're only state inspected, I can't do that. And they said, well, what's it gonna take? Do I need to send somebody there to pick it up and put it on a plane? And I'm like, well, first of all, we don't have 100 pounds of jerky laying around, like it just doesn't happen. So I scrounged everything I could and put 70-pound package together and a few steaks, sent them, broke the rules of crossing state lines with meat. 2 weeks later, they wanted 200 more pounds, right? And what do football players need? They like salt and they want protein, and it was something quick. So now we sell, you know, this year we already have an order for 1,000 pounds of jerky that we're gonna send straight to the football team. So for us, I mean, that's roughly a $40,000 order that wouldn't have happened if this guy wouldn't have stopped and got to see. And the other thing too I did with him, he asked if we did any shooting on the place, and I said, well, yeah, we shoot all the time. And so we went out and shot coyotes, put them in the swather and put the lights on and found some coyotes. But I had no idea. We didn't talk about that he was a football player. He was just this really big dude that wanted to play around a little bit. So you never know what's going to come, and I think opening your farm up for people to visit gives you ideas and helps introduce you to potential markets.
Are you still having good luck fermenting your micronutrients?
We are. So we make a product called Super Magro, and that's we use biology from the intestines of our cow or the rumen. Put it into, we start with 15-gallon plastic drums, feed it with molasses, feed it with milk protein. We have a dairy farmer or a goat dairy next to us, so we're using that protein. Put it in, it takes about 30 days to get these minerals chelated. But we can then, depending on what a SAP analysis shows us, we can then add specific mineral, get it chelated into a liquid form, and then go spray. And it allows us the flexibility that roughly, like, once we find out something, within 3 days, we can be fixing the problem. So, yeah, and it's made it really cheap for us to operate.
Guys, if you want more information on Cory's farm, there is a YouTube video. What's her name? The video.
Amy.
Yeah. So, Amy, if you search Cory Miller, Regenerative agriculture, that'll pop up, and then I did an hour-long interview with him 2 years ago that we get into more detail about a lot of the stuff he's doing on his farm. So,
Thank you, guys.